A 67-year-old engineer retires with $3.2 million saved, 43 years at the same aerospace company, maxed out his 401k every single year. He's got more money than 70% of retirees. 6 months later, he's sitting in his paid-off house having a panic attack because he spent $1,100 on a weekend trip to visit his daughter. Meanwhile, across town, a woman retires at 62 with $470,000. Everyone tells her she's undersaved. She's traveling to Portugal next month and sleeping fine at night. Here's the question that nobody in the financial services industry wants you to ask. If retirement planning actually worked the way they tell you it works, why does a person with 7 times more money feel 7 times more anxious? I'm gonna walk you through 10 lessons about retirement that have nothing to do with Monte Carlo simulations or safe withdrawal rates. These come from reading what Warren Buffett actually wrote about retirement, not what financial advisors claim he said. And here's what makes this interesting. Buffett is 94 and still working. He's the worst possible person to give retirement advice. Except he's not giving advice about how to retire. He's explaining the system you're entering, the incentives, the psychological traps, the things that actually determine whether you're miserable or not. And almost none of it is about the number in your brokerage account. Think about retirement like this. Your entire adult life, you've been playing a game where the rules were clear. Show up, do the work, get paid. The feedback loop was immediate. But retirement is a completely different game with completely different rules, and nobody tells you what they are. Instead, they sell you a rule book written by people who make money when you're scared. That's the frame we're working with. Start with the thing everyone gets backwards. You've been told your whole life that you need some massive number to retire. 1 million, 2 million. The financial services industry loves this because it keeps you saving, which means more assets under management, which means more fees for them. But here's what actually happens. You retire, and suddenly all the expenses tied to working vanish. You're not commuting 45 minutes each way, burning gas. You're not buying work clothes. You're not stress eating $15 salads at your desk because you had 3 back-to-back meetings and no time to pack lunch. For most people, expenses drop 30 to 40% automatically without even trying. Then you pay off your mortgage before retirement, which you should absolutely do, and your biggest fixed cost disappears. Now you're living on half what you thought you needed. I know a guy who spent his entire career as a project manager, retired at 64 with $580,000. His advisor told him he was significantly undersaved, kept pushing him to delay retirement, keep working, build that number up. He ignored the advisor. 5 years later, he's traveling, spending time with his grandkids, completely fine. His actual annual spending is $31,000. At a 4% withdrawal rate, he could pull $23,000 from his portfolio and still have Social Security covering the rest. He's not just fine, he's got buffer. But you know what's wild? He told me the first year was psychologically brutal. Not because of money, because he felt guilty every single time he spent anything. 40 years of delayed gratification doesn't just turn off. Your brain has been trained to optimize for accumulation. Now you're supposed to flip a switch and optimize for distribution. That's a psychological shift most people never make. They die with most of their money unspent, having denied themselves experiences they could easily afford, because the accumulation mentality was so deeply programmed they couldn't escape it. The financial industry calls this longevity risk. They frame it as the risk of outliving your money. But the actual risk most retirees face is underliving their money, dying with $2 million in the bank and a list of trips they never took because they were afraid. What 99% of people do is save like they're gonna live forever and spend like they're gonna die tomorrow. You wanna do the opposite. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, but I still need to know the number. And look, I'm not saying money doesn't matter. Having 200,000 saved versus 800,000 saved makes a massive difference. But past a certain threshold, the marginal utility of additional savings on your actual retirement satisfaction drops off a cliff. A guy with 500,000 who understands this psychological frame will be happier than a guy with 3 million who doesn't. Because the $3 million guy is going to spend his retirement optimizing his asset allocation and running withdrawal calculators at 2 in the morning. Here's the second thing. Your health is your actual capital. Money is just tokenized time. But if your body doesn't work, all the tokenized time in the world is worthless. I've watched people grind for 40 years, building wealth, and then retire at 65 with destroyed knees, high blood pressure, and prediabetes. They've got the savings to travel, but they can't walk through an airport without paying. They monetize their health to build their portfolio, and then discovered the exchange rate going backwards is terrible. The math on this is stupid, simple, but everyone ignores it. 30 minutes of walking per day reduces all-cause mortality by 20 to 30%. That's not some boutique longevity hack. That's just moving your body like humans are designed to move. But people don't do it because the feedback loop is too slow. You skip the walk today and nothing bad happens. You skip it for 6 months and still nothing obvious happens. Then you're 70 and your cardiovascular system is cooked and you're paying the compounded debt of 10,000 skipped walks. This is a systems problem. We're optimizing for legible metrics that don't matter while ignoring illegible metrics that determine everything. Your net worth is legible. It shows up on a statement. Your cardiovascular capacity is illegible until it's too late. So people optimize their 401k contributions and ignore their VO2 max. Then they retire and realize they optimized the wrong variable. There's a guy I know who retired at 59, sold his business, had multiple millions, spent his first year of retirement getting back surgery because he'd spent 15 years sitting in an office chair letting his core turn to mush. The surgery cost $60,000. 6 months of recovery. Now he's fine. But he paid cash money to fix a problem that was completely preventable with basic maintenance. That's not bad luck. That's a predictable outcome of ignoring physical capital. Third lesson. Your brain atrophies on the same timeline as your body, just less visibly. Most people retire and their intellectual life just stops. They stop reading anything challenging. Stop learning new skills. Default to cable news and true crime documentaries. And look, I'm not saying you need to be reading Proust in retirement, but your brain is use it or lose it tissue. Cognitive decline isn't just biological aging, it's lack of stimulus. The people I know who are sharp in their 70s and 80s all have one thing in common. They stayed intellectually curious. They're learning languages, taking classes, reading dense nonfiction. They're challenging their brains with novel information. The people who declined fast stopped. They retired and just let their minds idle. And an idling mind decays. This is where the game analogy comes back. In the work game, intellectual challenge was built into the system. You had problems to solve, new regulations to navigate, technology that kept changing. Retirement removes all of that external structure. If you don't replace it with internal structure, with self-directed learning, your cognitive capacity degrades. And that degradation accelerates isolation, which accelerates further decline. It's a doom loop. I'm not talking about staying productive in the capitalist sense. I'm talking about keeping your mind plastic, learning for learning's sake. Because the alternative is spending your last 2 decades in a progressively narrowing mental corridor where everything unfamiliar feels threatening. That's not freedom. That's a different kind of prison. Fourth thing, relationships are the only asset class that appreciates over time if you maintain them. Everything else degrades. Your house needs repairs, your car depreciates. Your portfolio is subject to sequence of returns risk, but a friendship you've invested in for 40 years, that compounds. The problem is most people don't realize this until they retire and suddenly they're alone. Here's what happens. You spend your working years optimizing for career advancement. You move for jobs. You work late. You skip dinners, miss kids' events, let friendships lapse because you're busy building your career and your savings. You tell yourself you'll reconnect later. Then you retire and later arrives and you discover that those relationships aren't just paused. They're gone. People moved on. Your kids are busy with their own lives. Your friends have their own retirement routines that don't include you. There's a 68-year-old guy I know, retired CFO, spent 40 years climbing the ladder, made excellent money, retired with over $2 million, calls me every few months because he's lonely. His wife divorced him in his 50s. His kids are cordial but distant. He optimized for money and it worked. But he's rich and alone, and at 68, you can't just go make new deep friendships. That ship sailed. The financial industry never tells you this because there's no product to sell you. They can sell you portfolio optimization. They can't sell you relationships. But if you're 60 and realize you spent 40 years prioritizing spreadsheets over people, no amount of money fixes that. You can't retroactively attend your daughter's volleyball games. You can't go back and be present for conversations with your spouse. Those moments are gone. This isn't sentimental, it's structural. Humans are social primates. We're wired for connection. When that's missing, everything else stops mattering. People with strong social ties live longer, have better health outcomes, report higher life satisfaction. It's not close. The difference is enormous. But you don't build those ties at 65. You build them over decades. If you defer that maintenance, you're gonna feel it. Fifth lesson, simplify your life before you retire, not after. Most people spend their working years accumulating complexity. Bigger house, multiple cars, storage units full of stuff they haven't looked at in years, 3 checking accounts, 4 credit cards, investment accounts at 5 different brokerages because they kept rolling over 401ks. All of this creates administrative burden that you don't notice while you're working because you're already in constant motion. But retire, and suddenly you're spending hours every month managing complexity that adds 0 value to your life. I watched my uncle retire at 66 with a 4-bedroom house, 2 cars, 3 storage units, and accounts at 7 different financial institutions. He spent his first year of retirement consolidating and downsizing. Sold the house, moved to a 2-bedroom condo, got rid of 70% of his stuff, consolidated his accounts. He told me it was like dropping 50 pounds of psychological weight. Not because the stuff was bad, but because managing it all was cognitive overhead he didn't need. This is where the financial industry's incentives misalign with yours. Again, they want you to have accounts with them. They want you to keep rolling money into their system. They don't care that you now have 17 different login credentials to track and password resets happening every month because you can't remember which email you used for which account. That's your problem, not theirs. Complexity is a tax. You pay it with time and mental energy. And the more complex your financial life, the more you're paying. Simplification isn't about deprivation. It's about reducing surface area. The fewer things you own, the fewer things own you. The fewer accounts you have, the less administrative nonsense you deal with. This is pure overhead reduction. Sixth thing, you need a reason to wake up that isn't your job. This is the one that breaks people. Your entire adult identity is built around work, your title, your expertise, your sense of contribution. Then you retire and all of that is just gone. You're not a director anymore. You're not the guy everyone comes to with questions. You're just a person with free time. And for a lot of people, especially men, that is psychologically devastating. I know a guy who was a VP of operations for a manufacturing company, retired at 63. Within 6 months, he was depressed. Not clinically, but situationally. He'd spent 40 years being needed, making decisions, solving problems. Then overnight, nobody needed him. No emails, no calls, no meetings. He described it as feeling erased. He had plenty of money. His health was decent, but he had no purpose. And that absence created a void that nothing filled. This is a design problem. We structure society around work as identity, but we don't prepare people for what comes after. There's no onboarding process for retirement. You just stop showing up and figure it out. And most people don't figure it out. They drift, watch TV, play golf, if they're into that. But there's no deeper sense of meaning. They're just running out the clock. The people who do well in retirement solve this before retiring. They already had something meaningful lined up. Maybe it's mentoring young people in their industry. Maybe it's volunteering for a cause they care about. Maybe it's a hobby that becomes genuinely engaging. The specific thing matters less than having something. You need a reason to get up, a sense that your time has purpose beyond consumption. Seventh lesson, fear is the product. The financial services industry runs on fear. Fear of running out of money, fear of market crashes, fear of inflation, fear of healthcare costs. They sell this fear and then sell you products to mitigate the fear they just created. It's a brilliant business model, and it's completely destructive to your actual well-being. Here's how the system works. You go to a financial advisor. They run you through a retirement calculator. It asks you to estimate your lifespan, your spending, market returns, inflation, healthcare costs. It spits out a probability of success. 78% chance you don't run out of money. That's a 22% chance of failure. Suddenly, you're terrified. The advisor nods gravely, tells you that you're undersaved, suggests working a few more years or cutting your planned spending, maybe suggests some products with guaranteed income. They just created anxiety and positioned themselves as the solution. But here's what that calculator didn't tell you. The assumptions are deliberately conservative to make you scared. They assume you'll never adjust spending in a downturn, never downsize, never be flexible. They model you as a robot who spends a fixed inflation-adjusted amount every year regardless of market conditions. No human actually behaves this way, but the model assumes it because realistic assumptions would show you're probably fine and then you wouldn't need their high-fee annuity product. I'm not saying don't plan. I'm saying understand the incentives of the person showing you the plan. If their business model requires you to be afraid, their advice will make you afraid. That's not conspiracy. That's just incentive alignment. They're not lying. They're optimizing for their own survival. But their optimization is not your optimization. The antidote to fear is having enough cash buffer to weather volatility without panicking. If you retire with 2 years of expenses in cash, you can ride out market downturns without selling at the bottom. That simple buffer eliminates 90% of retirement anxiety. But advisors don't emphasize this because cash earns them nothing. They want your money invested in products they manage. Again, not evil, just incentives. 8th lesson, spending the money you saved is psychologically harder than saving it. This is the paradox nobody prepares you for. You spend 40 years in accumulation mode. Every dollar saved is a dollar toward freedom. Your brain learns that spending equals failure and saving equals success. Then you retire, and you're supposed to reverse that entire psychological framework. Now, spending is success. You're supposed to use the money, but your brain doesn't update that fast. I've seen people with millions sitting on their money because spending feels wrong. They'll agonize over a $200 expense. Not because they can't afford it, but because the psychological training is so deep that spending equals loss. They save for freedom, but they can't access the freedom because spending still feels like failure. This creates a situation where people die with most of their wealth unspent. Not because they're being strategic about legacy planning, because they literally couldn't bring themselves to spend it. They ran the accumulation playbook until they died. That's not financial success. That's psychological failure. The fix is reframing. The money isn't the goal. The money is a tool to buy time, experiences, freedom from worry. If you're not using the tool, you wasted your life saving for nothing. That's the harsh truth. You optimized for a number and then didn't use the number. You could have worked less, stressed less, lived more, and ended up in the same place. 9th lesson. The past is sunk cost. Most retirees spend enormous psychological energy dwelling on past decisions. Should have saved more. Should have taken that other job. Should have bought that house in 1998. Should have invested in Apple. This is pure waste. You cannot recover sunk costs. The past is not a variable you can optimize. The only thing you control is what you do next. There's a guy I know who spent his entire retirement bitter about missing the real estate boom in 2005. He had a chance to buy rental properties and passed. Now those properties are worth 4 times what they cost. He brings it up constantly. It's been 20 years. He's consumed by a decision he can't change. Meanwhile, his bitterness is destroying his relationships and ruining his present. This is a cognitive trap. Your brain wants to replay past decisions because it feels like if you analyze enough, you'll extract some lesson that prevents future mistakes. But there's nothing left to extract. You're just inflicting psychological damage on yourself. The only productive relationship with past mistakes is to learn the transferable lesson and move on. Forgiveness is a financial concept, not just an emotional one. Unforgiveness means you're paying ongoing interest on a debt that's already been settled. Someone wronged you 20 years ago? That's done. They moved on. If you're still carrying resentment, you're the only one paying. That's a terrible investment. Write it off. Take the loss. Stop paying interest. 10th lesson. Most retirement advice is designed to benefit advisors, not retirees. The entire financial services industry is built around extracting fees from accumulated wealth. They don't care if you're happy. They care if you keep paying them 1% annually to manage money that could sit in an index fund. They want you scared enough to need them, but not so scared that you withdraw everything. This is why every piece of mainstream retirement advice is about managing money, asset allocation, rebalancing, tax optimization. Not because those things matter most, because those are the things they can charge you for. They can't charge you for taking walks, maintaining friendships, or finding purpose. So they don't talk about those things. They talk about the stuff that keeps you as a client. The real retirement challenge isn't financial. It's psychological and structural. Can you find meaning without work? Can you maintain relationships? Can you stay healthy? Can you let go of past regrets? Can you spend the money you saved? Those are the actual determinants of retirement satisfaction. But there's no financial product for any of that. So the industry pretends the problem is portfolio construction. Here's a real scenario to make this concrete. Tom retires at 64 with $900,000. He's got Social Security coming at 67. His house is paid off. His advisor tells him he needs to be conservative because his savings are below the recommended threshold. Suggests a portfolio of 60% bonds, 40% stocks. Tells him to plan on withdrawing 3%, maybe 3.5% if markets cooperate. That's $27,000 to $31,000 annually. Tom does the math. With Social Security, that's about $60,000 total annual income. His expenses are $45,000. He's fine. But his advisor keeps sending quarterly updates about market volatility and suggesting annuities for guaranteed income. The advisor's fee is 1% of assets under management. That's $9,000 annually. Meanwhile, Tom could have the same portfolio in a target date fund at Vanguard for 0.15%, which is $1,350 annually. The difference is $7,650 every single year. Over a 20-year retirement, that's $153,000 in fees paid for advice that mostly generates anxiety. That's the system. It's not conspiracy. It's incentives. So here's what you actually do. 3 things. 1, figure out your real expenses in retirement. Not what you think you'll spend, what you actually spend. Track it. Most people discover they need way less than they thought. 2, prioritize health maintenance as the highest return investment you can make. Walking, basic strength training, reasonable diet. You don't need a program. You need consistency. 3, solve the purpose problem before you retire. If your identity is entirely work, retirement will break you. Build something else. Volunteer. Teach. Create. Do something that gives you a reason to get up that isn't a paycheck. Everything else is details. The financial stuff mostly takes care of itself if you're not an idiot. Don't sell in downturns. Don't try to time the market. Keep 2 years of cash. Use index funds. Ignore your advisor's quarterly panic updates. Done. What 99% of people do is obsess over their portfolio and ignore their health, relationships, and sense of purpose. Then they wonder why they're miserable despite having money. Don't be that person. You have one retirement. It's not a dress rehearsal. The goal isn't dying with the highest net worth. The goal is using your time well while you have it. The money is just a tool. Don't forget to actually use it.